these clicker questions after they have already learned the material, and make sure that they watch the videos because they have to take an online quiz at home. So it's not they can say, I watched the video and here I am. So, and that's part of the grade itself. And I get this clicker quiz, I have 4 choices in this multiple choice clicker quiz. I get sometimes 25% for each of those choices. So you're already finding out the kind of conceptual knowledge they are deriving from just by looking at the videos themselves. It is not right. So 25% of people, 75% of people are not getting the concept. So I don't believe that the instructor is going to get replaced. I think there's going to be and what people say there's going to be a flipped classroom in my inadequacy of my words, I'm going to say there's going to be a shift rather than a flipping. So what's going to shift is that what the role of the instructor is going to be. So you're going to get a lot of the transfer information through the videos or through Acrobat PDF files or through a simulation. But in the classroom itself, you are going to look at the higher order thinking. And that's why it's called a flipped classroom, that you are not doing the higher order thinking at home, but you're doing it in the classroom itself. How is the challenge there? I have 85 students in my class. I had a rough time trying to do that higher order thinking, making them think higher order in the classroom itself. So it's going to work in very small class sizes. So that's an opportunity to see that if we're going to have these flipped classrooms and give a much richer experience to the students, we do have to think about class sizes.
Lois.
Yeah, I have some concerns for the classroom of the future. I was having this conversation with my son, and he was saying that he thought perhaps in the future the premium educational experience will be face-to-face. And so that was such an interesting comment from him. And it made me think about access to education. It made me think about the privilege of educational experience. So I have some concerns about that. As far as envisioning the future, I can tell you what I hope for the future. And that's better. It's more comfortable with that. I would hope in the future that we continue to reach back into the past and reach towards whatever that future is, and make it relevant to our students, engage their imaginations. And as I was saying earlier, you really need to understand what I mean when I say by engaging their imaginations. I mean that in a Coleridgean sense, that the information, the knowledge enters into them in a significant, relevant way. And that my hope for my students, for our students, for our culture, is that the education transforms them and then they can go out and make the society the one that it should be, which is going to take a long time, I think. So that's what I'm hoping for the future, and that we use technology wisely, that we still stay with some of the basics, like a clear, organized, relevant, tell me what it's about kind of lecture, how it relates to me, and then use the technology. We use it, it doesn't use us. Because I think it can be kind of fun to just create all these things and kind of lose sight of the thesis of the class. The thesis of the class. So that's what I'm hoping.
Thank you. Christy?
I went over on the last one, but I still get to
You got to.
Well, let me say, I think the future is here and it's over there in your smart lab. That is what we're looking forward to, I think, in the sense that, yes, congratulate yourselves on the smart lab. But it is a flip, and it is a kind of emporium combined type hybrid method there, but it is something that I see happening nationally and is to great effect. In other words, having a high impact. And there are some literature on high impact practices, and I think that's the movement of the future. And if you're not familiar with personalized learning solutions, check it out. And my simplest analogy is, it's almost like Amazon, and some people don't like this, but the idea behind Amazon is I read a lot of literature on higher education and teaching and learning and on leadership. Pornography, no, I'm kidding. But Amazon knows what I read, right? Amazon knows. And so it sends me messages to meet my needs, right? That's individualized, personalized learning. I can't do that for 250 students. So my point is, when a student struggles to find the slope of the line, this software knows. It's analyzed thousands of other students and knows if you miss the slope of the line, here are the things you need to go back over, right? It can do so much more than we can do individually. And so my thought is we need to embrace that and use that in partnership, not without, and as Atar said, that means our role shifts. It doesn't disappear. Our role becomes, I know I hate the terminology, guide on the side as opposed to sage on the stage, but the idea behind the flip, and this is once again supported by all the research, is that we need, and if there's one thing I'm still struggling to do, it is make more time, class time, processing time. So as you said, we can do a lot on the front end and have students. The learning-centered model says, traditionally we disseminated information. They were first exposed to it in class, and then we tell them, go read about it. This learning center, if you read Blumberg is my favorite source, but Mary Ellen Weinberg, Judith Blumberg, all their learning centered work. The idea is it's multi-directional. We need more time with students delving directly into the content, working on the content, applying the content. So more class time is processing time, less class time as dissemination time, basically.
Well, I promised a conversation, and this is your chance. What I ask you to do is you take the mic, please briefly introduce yourself, and then ask a question. We don't need statements. Ask a question. You may direct that question to the full panel or individual members of the panel, and we'll move on to the next one. Who'd like to be first?
I'm surprised. Hi there. My name's Joan Taylor. I'm a professor in the College of Education and Secondary English Education. And last night I had the distinct pleasure of attending one of the last lecture series presented by a colleague of mine, Dr. Barbara Cruz. It was fabulous. And one of the questions we were left with, I'm sure you're familiar with the last lecture with Randy Pouch, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So at any rate, one of the questions we were left with was, what would be the one message that you would give if you had to give the last lecture? What would the topic be?
Obviously, for me, it would be poetry. The poetry and humanities teaches us why we're human. And that would be, if I had anything to say, it would be that. And the poetry is for everyone. That's not the commercial, which it is. But it's for everyone. It's not from out there. It's here, and it's part of what makes us as a people, you know, who we are. So that's what I would say. That would be my message.
Lois would like to know that while Dr. Cahill was attending the last lecture last night, we had Jory Graham across campus meeting with Pulitzer Prize winner and celebrated poet, meeting with a large group of other faculty, students, and members from the community. The arts, poetry are incredibly important to this aspect of our community.
It is, yes.
Would anyone else like to
Well, I think, I think if you're asking content-wise, I mean, I do research that I think is going to give the world access to safe drinking water, and I can talk about chemistry, but if I had one lecture to give, it'd be about teaching science, and it'd be about the passion for teaching and how to get that, and even the chemistry of passion. And there is some chemistry, there is some science to passion, and different biomolecules that are released at different times. There's one study recently in Scientific American where they subjected different types of people to a crying baby. I don't know if you are familiar with this study. And they found that musicians, classic trained musicians, had a more severe emotional response to these children and to the crying. And my colleagues over in the Global Hearing and Speech Center would appreciate, they hooked these people up, and there's a biomechanical reason for why people respond this way, or why people were passionate about this crying baby. Was it something that the musicians did during their training? They evolved, or is it just that that type of person tends to become a musician? Either way, there are a release of chemicals. There is a biomechanical substance to passion. So I'd somehow probably combine chemistry and passion for teaching, but the take-home message would be showing people how to be passionate about what you do. As I said, I'm a teacher by good fortune, and I want to share how other people can feel that way as well.
Okay, I have a question. I'm Phil Moja. I'm a biologist. I teach anatomy, which is quite challenging sometimes.
Sure.
What is the single, this is for all the panel members, the single most important thing to be an effective teacher you have found? Is it empathy? What is it? The single one most important thing?
I have two, so I don't know if you'll be ready for two. Well, the two which I've been talking about, I talked to most of my colleagues also about that, is to make an emotional connection with the student. And that does take one-on-one time. Students are not going to open up to you just because you're talking to them. You have to create a trust between the students, and then they will tell you something that they don't even tell the parents. So that's doesn't. The second one is to have high expectations of the students. To have high expectations of the students. You might be thinking. Some people might think that if you lower your expectations, students are going to like you because then they're doing less work. But time and again, I've seen that whenever I have lowered my expectations for one reason or the other, they have not really felt comfortable about it.
I'm gonna make this real quick because I've already spoken about it. I believe it is that passion that you can have, and as I mentioned before, actually convincing the students that you care about their success in this course and beyond. Not just saying it, not just actually doing it, but convincing them that you do. That connection, I guess was what you said, that connection, that welcoming nature, I think has gone a long way in my teaching.
Piggybacking on what everyone said, I would say respect. Respect for the discipline and respect for the students. And as I tell my students, my grading reflects the fact that I respect your intelligence. You know, and so, you know, that's hard to argue with, I think, otherly.
And that's what leads into mine, and it is care about students and their learning. But I do think once they know that you care, they'll receive that feedback in a completely different way.
Yes.
And that, I think, is one of the big problems that we have, is that if we give feedback from a place where they don't feel like we truly care about them and their learning, then they reject it, and we're not successful anyway. So we might as well figure out a way to show them that we do care about them and their learning, and they're very receptive to any feedback that we give.
Hi, my name is Philip Bishop. Also, you spoke earlier about the shift towards massive open online courses and some of the limitations. And specifically, one of the things I would like to ask the panel about is there are some skills that we cannot transmit. And one of those, I think, is kind of a fuzzy word, but leadership. And I was just wondering, what role do you think leadership has in the profession of teaching?
Is that yours? Yes, you.
I think I'll say something. Philip, you talk
Well,
about me.
maybe yourself.
Well, I think leadership, when I try, I don't think I can teach leadership to my students per se, because I'm an engineering professor, so I have to figure out how to do it myself first. But what I try to emphasize in my students is that many times what happens is that when a student comes to my class, says, "No, Dr. Carl, I'm spending about 3 hours on this thing, and my colleague is spending only 1 hour on this thing. He makes a higher grade than what I have made." And I think what happens is that many times we have these bright students in our classrooms. And what happens is that they get labeled bright. And they are now reluctant to accept that they make mistakes. They're reluctant to say that, hey, I spent double the time than you did to learn the same thing. And what I'm trying to tell you is that if you put in that deliberate practice into whatever you are learning, I think you're automatically going to become a leader because people will follow you.
Yeah, can I add, I love that this ties into a previous question about the future of education, because I agree. I don't think you can transmit leadership. I do think you can model it and develop it. So it's the process of developing skills, and leadership is a skill. So it means we need to put students in learning environments where they actually have the opportunities to develop those skills. In the traditional classroom that I experienced as an undergrad, I didn't get that opportunity. I'm hoping that future classrooms, the classrooms that people in this room and myself are creating, that we are giving students opportunities to actually develop those skills.
When I first started teaching and people ask what I do, my grandmother asked me what I do, but she assumes all chemists just get stains out of the carpet. And she was always asking for my advice, and I never knew.
You take the stain on the carpet?
I could not take the stain. I probably couldn't But, you know, I first said, I teach chemistry. After a little while, I started saying, you know, it's a harder, I think I'm just teaching math. and then I changed, you know, I'm teaching English, actually. Because, you know, really understanding these procedures, writing a good lab report, especially important for our deaf and hard of hearing students. But now I think, I would explain that I teach lifelong learning skills. I do, which are especially important for our deaf and hard of hearing students, and self-advocacy. It's hard to teach, and you have to model it. But I do place a large emphasis on teaching students how to be lifelong learners unto themselves. And I would tie that in with leadership. I don't have a formulaic way that I do that, but I do try to reinforce the importance of the lifelong learning to the students. And in that, I believe leadership is encompassed.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to, it has to be modeled, but I like to ask my students questions. I say to them, one of the great lessons I learned from my education is that nothing happens unless you make it happen. Okay? So I asked them, what will you make happen this semester? How will you affect the culture of this campus? How will you, and I try to present them in very concrete ways, opportunities. And I say to them, look, it's not like you should do this, it's that you could do this. You know? How will you make something new happen on campus? What will be your contribution, not only to your educational career, but to making this campus, you know, as wonderful as it is? And when you start asking those kinds of questions and then follow up with very specific things, like I might say, as I've said to one of my students, well, where do you want to go with this honors program? If you want to, we have a scholarship that we only give to 2 students, and it's a big process where they will go on and get a full ride to the university. So it's a really big deal when they leave us. But they have to demonstrate leadership, scholarship, etc. So I said to her this semester, what are some of the things that you will do? What were some of the creative, innovative things? And I said, I don't want to see, you know, the Christmas angel thing. I want to see something bigger, and how will it relate to what you want to do? She wants to be a child advocate when, you know, in social work. So those are some of the, I mean, asking those questions and then presenting very, very concrete opportunities, I think, is at least one way of putting it in context. I don't know if you teach it, but you can ask the question.
Hi, my name is David Frankel. I teach in the School of Theater and Dance. And I was wondering if you make a distinction between education and training, and if you do, what that distinction is.
Yes. Again, the distinction. No, I'm getting there. I'll talk about my creative writers, you know, the artists. I say that you must learn your craft. All right, you must learn your craft, and that your education is broader than that. Okay, to be a truly educated human being requires more than just simply coming to the class, you know, taking notes or whatever, and then going back to your car. You know, and I asked them again the question: what does it mean to be an educated human being? You know, and why is that a value? So again, to what Todd said before about lifelong skills, I think that, to me, that's the broader issue about education. But education, especially with the creative parts, with creative writing, there's a whole bunch of things that they need to do in order to be the artist they want to be, as you well know. In fact, I was saying one of the things I wish that I had in graduate school was a course that taught me how to deal with this kind of stuff. But
I think to me, training starts at the first two levels, which is can you recall knowledge and can you apply knowledge? I think education starts when you are able to say, when do I need to apply that knowledge and why I'm applying that knowledge? That's my short answer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's similar. I think I do separate the two. Mr. Senator, I categorically deny having a good answer to this question. But I do kind of envision the chemistry that I'm teaching my students. Many of my students do go on to a career right after my program. I do kind of label that as training. I'm training them how to use instrumentation. I'm training them how to interpret data. And it's going to directly help their employment. But I think the education comes in on what I just spoke about, the lifelong learning skills. I see that as education. I can give them the technical knowledge as part of training, and the lifelong learning as part of education. Mr. Senator, I have no good answer to this question.
Do I have to answer? I think everything was said.
Hi. As a doctoral granting institution, USF is involved in preparing the future faculty. What are some of your ideas about how we can prepare graduate students to become effective teachers and also help us as part of the student success movement and efforts that we have here at the university?
I'm an advocate for preparing future faculty programs, and everything I've understood about the good programs incorporate things that you wouldn't just get in typical new faculty orientation, because graduate students have all kinds of things going on. They're close in age to their students and other issues and multiple roles, and so there's a broader answer to that question. But my thought is that it's much the same whether Kevin and I talked about training programs for adjunct, new faculty, even faculty who've been around for a while. A lot of it is knowing how learning works. So back to I think one of the key components is knowing what methods are going to be effective to achieve the outcomes. And so we need to look at models for effectiveness. And once again, research or evidence-based practices would be my sole focus. And then from that comes all kinds of issues about, I do separate presentations of each of these topics for faculty, but things like engaging students, motivating students, preventing incivility, creating clear course policies, rubrics, assignments, syllabi. There's a lot of detail. In fact, I think McKeeche's Teaching Tips now has 44 chapters or something insane like that. So I'd say there's some good models out there to follow. McKeeche is one. I think the top two books were McKeeche and then Walford's. Do you remember the title of her book? Tools for Teaching, maybe it is.
Well, that's Davis.
Yeah, Davis as Tools for Teaching. So I think there's some great models out there that were once again comprehensive and looking at all the detail. But if we get the underlying how students learn and how to facilitate that learning, that's key.
I might offer new students my own experience as a new teacher. Twice a year, usually December and May, I got together with about 2 other professors in teaching the same types of courses. And we do this informally. We do this at somebody's house. We'd have tea, we'd have lunch, and we'd always begin, and we take notes. And we always begin the sessions with this question: what do we want to never have happen again? And how did you deal with X, Y, and Z? And then we would, in a very informal way, exchange kind of best practices for, and then like, how did you deal with, X kind of situation? And what do you think about this? And because it was informal, it was a really wonderful way of processing what happened and then hoping for the better for the future. Also, we would exchange like lessons, and I'm still using some of their methods. I mean, some of their lessons were just, and I give them credit, you know. That's like what we tell our creative writers, you know, the old adage that good writers borrow, great writers steal. And I think that's true for teachers, you know. But I do give credit, and that's like a long time ago. Even though it's a real simple thing, that's what worked for me, and I might offer that to new teachers.
I think it's probably wise to inform, I don't want to use the term warn, these graduate students who might become faculty members of the pressures and challenges of being a balanced teacher-scholar. And that there's a lot of demands on your time, and sometimes it's hard to figure out which direction you should go in. I'm actually a proponent of a balanced teacher-scholar. I think individuals who are knowledgeable in their field often can become better teachers. You can attack a concept from different and creative ways when you really understand that information. And I've been thrown into courses that I wouldn't consider myself a content expert in, and I've really struggled. I've used all of the good teaching techniques we've discussed here, but it wasn't as successful because I didn't have that knowledge, that deeper knowledge. So again, I'm a proponent of the balanced teacher-scholar, but I think it's wise to talk to these students about the expectations and the challenges of doing that as soon as they finish their degree to go on to be teachers.
Since Professor Lukács is here, I would suggest a change to our PhD program. Every student is required to take 2 courses, one in research methods and education, and another one is scholarship for teaching and learning. Because about 3-4 decades ago, people in science and engineering were required to know a foreign language, because many of the journals were written in other languages. So it's still not sunk into the academia that we are creating these future educators, and should we make some requirement for these people? And I think those 2 courses should be required for every PhD student who wants to teach, or maybe doesn't want to teach. And also, what I would like people all students to do is to teach a class. Every graduate student has worked with me as a PhD student or even a master's students. I have made every attempt that they at least teach 1 class independently. Because time and again, it is improving by research that good researchers may not be good teachers, but good teachers are always good researchers.
Professor Claude, let me assure you that we think alike on this.
Thank you so much.
We've had conversations in the past. The challenge for you is to convince your colleagues. And I can give you this assurance that our graduate school, under the leadership of Karen and Antley, are both providing support services for active PhD students or doctoral students at the university. So we provide the support at this moment in time. We do not require it. I happen to believe it's in the best interests of PhD students. It's going to make them much more competitive when they reach out into the market if higher education is a pathway that they're pursuing. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Emily Colon, and I work in the Office of Admissions here at the university, and I also am a graduate student studying public administration. And I'm just interested in hearing from you guys what you feel is the single greatest challenge in higher education today.
Who can we start with? Todd, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll be quick, and this one's kind of obvious. I think funding.
Specifically, what would you use the funding for?
Well, I mean, you need the funding to run your university. I guess I'm referring to when the funding is reduced. You know, how do you have all your services? How do you put up a nice interactive tutoring center that you have? How do you do some of the things that USF is doing so well and leading by example? My institution is federally funded, and we are dealing with congressional sequestration right now. It's a tough time for people. The economy is tough, and when there is less funding, it's harder to support a lot of these ancillary or important services that you can provide for students. So that may be too obvious of an answer, but it's certainly on my mind right now. We're working with our administration and trying to figure out how we can teach the best that we can in this tough economical climate.
I think the biggest challenge to higher education is access for low-income students. Time and again, it has been shown that when you have low-income students, we tend to think that they're not bright. I'll give you statistics. 34% of our brightest students do come from the upper income quartile. Our still 17% of the brightest students, as defined by the regular standards of SAT scores and GPAs and things like that, do come from the lowest income quartile. At the same time, we only have 1 out of 25 students attending our 146 selected universities. So you're very much seeing that not only is the access not there, but also they're not getting a quality education to begin with. So I think having access to the low-income students is extremely important for the equality in the society which we so desire to take place.
I'm going to say resistance to change. And I use that as a perfect example. If we know this and we have these statistics, there's something standing in the way of our making something happen on that. I just heard your provost say, almost everyone nodded their head that this is something we think graduate students should do, but either we don't, maybe they have the funding, it may go back to that, or, in my experience when I visit campuses, it's often just, there are these pockets of resistance, basically. So sometimes it's, well, we have the stats to support, this is what's going to help our students be successful, but for whatever reason, people resist change. And change is difficult, and that's perhaps why, but I would say resistance to change is the bigger, more broad concern, in my opinion.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Dorn, and let me ask maybe a somewhat related question. At your own institutions, you've been talking about what you do inside your classroom, your passion that's inside your heart and heads and your relationship with your students. You haven't yet talked about what goes on outside your classroom. If you could identify one thing that you think your students need when they step outside the door of your classroom that your institution should be providing, what should that be? That would make the most difference.
I might say, after they leave, step outside my classroom in terms of our campus and college, is I think they need to experience the culture of the campus. And what that means is that we as a group, we as the educators of Paradise Valley Community College, all have a common vision. I do believe that's true for my campus. I am an advocate and truly blessed to work among these people. But from the person that tells the students where they can park, to the architect and the committee that created our Center for the Performing Arts, to the courses that are offered, that are not offered, to the people who run our honors program, to our faculty who take the students on archaeological digs, to our faculty member who put together our we have a cadaver lab, to the, all of it, is, and the students will come to me and say, this is a great place. And I say to them, yes. But, as I've said over and over and over again, since winning this award, since being given this award, that good teaching doesn't happen in a vacuum, I was able to do the things I wanted to do on my campus, in the campus and within the campus community, because everybody supported that common vision. And that, that may seem really obvious, it seems obvious to me, but it takes a great amount of effort and leadership and everybody to be on the same page. But without that culture, I think that you are this, you're this tiny, tiny note in this whirlwind of stuff that we call education. And while I think that that's important, it's so much better when we have an orchestra instead of just one little simple going ting.
My answer goes back to, I think it was the initial question about the last lecture, because I didn't have an opportunity to answer the last lecture question, and I think mine would be, if I could muster it out, the secret to successful living. And I think I found the answer, and it was in, it was on your campus yesterday. It was a flag hanging outside the intramural fields. Maybe you've seen it. It simply said, USF, make an impact. I think that's the secret. If we were all out there making an impact, and what I wrote down is that my hope is that we are inspiring students to make the world a better place, whether it's through chemistry, through engineering, through the creative arts, through psychology and other social sciences. You know, our students, we should be inspiring students to get out there and make the world a better place, and we can sleep at night.
Hi, I'm Travis Thompson, and I'm an administrator within undergraduate studies and also a doctoral candidate here at the University of South Florida. And I'd like to draw on your answer about hopefully both roles. So if we take learning to be a creative enterprise that's process-based and also one that involves change, what are some of the ways that you balance the tensions of fostering creative spaces while also balancing concrete political, geographical, physical realities or settings?
You guys are up, Ross and I.
Yeah, we did.
The term creative was huge.
What, me?
This is your thing.
Okay, let me paraphrase, and this is what I do when I don't understand a student. Let me say what I think you were asking me, and you can tell me if I'm right or not. How do you balance the practical with the theoretical? Is that what I'm hearing?
A little bit of that.
Okay. You wanna-
Well, learning, if we take learning maybe not just for students, but also learning as a professor in the practical setting of a classroom, how do you balance the tension of creating creative spaces for transformative learning to take place, but within what are often concrete, political, or physical settings?
I do feel, everything we're moving toward, all the what we call pedagogies of engagement, service learning or community engagement, authentic practice in terms of internship and undergraduate research, everything authentic. We get out there in the real world, and so the classroom, we're not limited to the classroom space is the answer.
As a writer, and working with my other fine arts faculty, we're working artists, and I think that makes a really big difference in teaching my students in creative writing, because I come to the classroom and say, look, some of these challenges I am putting to you, I am currently engaged in. And I do a lot of work on a national level within my professional organization and try to bring back to the campus, whether it's in the form of opportunities or speakers or information or scholarship, to my students. So they feel real, at least I hope they feel, connected to this larger scope. And our campus is really very proactive in creating opportunities that are linked to very specific course content. As you said, internships, but other things as well. So it's kind of like, as you were saying, for a holistic approach. I think there's something that the students respect when I say, I know how you feel because I also don't have enough time. Or I've just come back from a postdoc workshop. So I understand what it's like to be sitting there in the classroom and having people talk about my work, that kind of thing. So I think that kind of raises the bar a little bit in terms of comfort and trust, but also in terms of challenging them. I hope that answers some of your question.
I think you're right, though. I think that not all creative pedagogies lead to the benchmarks and successes that you want. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. And hopefully, if you find out that it's not effective, you'll go a different direction. But I visited the tutoring center today, and they have a creative space there, and they have some benchmarks to document that they are in fact doing what they say they're doing. They are increasing grades or passing grades by 15% over the years by using this model. So you have to really assess. It goes back to the self-reflection. Just because you did it doesn't mean that you should do it again because the work has been done one time. It's easier to do it the second time. You've got to really assess whether it's worked or not. And like I said, not every idea, they're good, but not every idea will lead to the teaching of your learning objectives, the benchmarks that you or your university or future employers have set on your students. So you sometimes have to do a pivot, if you will, and go in a different direction after you assess that.
I'm baffled by the question, so I want to do the best I can. I'll give a simple example. There was a memo which was sent in our university that please don't change the learning spaces like moving to chairs and things like that, because why waste the fire code? If somebody can solve that problem, I think we have one answer to the question.
Hello, I'm Roger Brindley. I'm a faculty member in college education, and I wanted to bounce off my colleague Sherman's question a minute ago. But Todd, I heard earlier in the afternoon you talk about the idea of I wish I had known. Tell some of my colleagues as a young professor to be quiet, straight out of the way, I'm coming through. Lois, you just articulate the vision of a utopian campus, whether you meant to or not. It sounded fantastic. Sherman asked the question about students. I want to ask the question about your faculty colleagues. How does your teaching go outside of your teaching environment and affect your faculty colleagues around you? How have you been able, perhaps you can tell us a process, a structure, or a story that illustrates how you've been able to sort of help your colleagues come on this ride with you to help the betterment of the broader student population?
I'll take the easy part. Maybe I'll give you the hard part. I haven't figured out necessarily how to do that with the more senior and veteran faculty, but through good mentoring, I think you really can instill these good practices on newer faculty. So I've been involved in setting up a mentoring program at my institution where we do co-teaching, and it's a formal mentoring that new faculty are required to be involved in. And I think we have gone a long way in showing them good traits, discussing good teaching skills. So that's kind of the easier one, I think, is the younger faculty, the junior faculty. I'll be honest, I have the same question. If there's time, I might throw it out to the collective audience on how you change that or you shift paradigm in educators' minds who have been doing it the way they've been doing it for a long time. Resistance to change. I don't have an answer for that, but if any of the collective audience does, I'd love to hear it.
I've just had I'm 23 years in, something like that, and just recently finally had that experience. And the only reason I'm here among my colleagues is that I've had the fortunate opportunity to have some research that was of real interest to people across the country. So I've been able to give faculty development workshops at 70 institutions or something like that, and do all kinds of conference keynotes and things. But even more important is that at my own institution, we were able to do a course redesign project that involved about a third of our faculty. And we used, as I said earlier, Judith Blumberg's learning-centered teaching workbook. And over the course of a semester, meeting pretty much every other week in small groups, we all redesigned our courses. So now I see on our campus, and our campus was a campus that I would have never said we would have a majority of our faculty on board with teaching that was learning-centered or student-centered. We had a lot of faculty resistance. It was one of those institutions where people prided themselves on students failing and so forth. Complete change and it's what I would call a tipping point sort of thing. Years ago, just 10 years ago, you kind of were looked down upon if you were engaging, if you were good at what you did. Today, it's the exact opposite. There is now social pressure for those people who are resisting. And so I think it's a social movement, and it can't be created by your administrators, it can be supported by your administrators, but it has to be a grassroots movement created by you. And so I'm a huge advocate of what people like Kevin do in the centers to facilitate that as well. But it has to be faculty, and I would say strategically engaging faculty role models and leaders within each of the departments to create, and then other faculty see how that has an impact on students. And it can happen, and for us it happened in less than a couple of years. It just took off once we really got a good group of faculty voted. But I will say, when I'm speaking on other campuses, I'll say hiring practices are critical. That we're still making the mistake of hiring people who don't get, yes, we want you to be researchers and scholars, but we want you to be teacher scholars. So we need to be hiring the right people and making it clear up front what our expectations are, that this is a campus where we are devoted to students and student success as well as our research.
Christy, Lois, go ahead.
On my campus, the fine arts people, we do a lot of collaborative work together. We really like each other a lot, and so that makes it kind of wonderful. For example, I'm running a jazz opera with my colleague who's a composer. The visual art surrounds his work with our percussionists. So that's been really wonderful. But over on the other side of campus, our science colleagues and so forth, we've made efforts. Well, one of the things I did, quite simply, was walk across campus and start talking to them and inviting them to certain events that we had. But over and above, something I created a couple of years ago, I think was very effective in kind of bringing us all together on the same page. I went to our faculty senate and proposed that we create a tribute to teaching and learning essay contest, which was open to everybody. It had to be a student who was enrolled or is enrolled in our campus. It had to be an essay that was about a full-time person, because it was full-time faculty senate. And then we've got an outside judge. We judged the contest. I put it together in a little booklet. And then what I did was I excerpted parts of it and sent out, and I did it across disciplines, so nobody felt that we have economics with Spanish or whatever. And sent it out and said, this is what your students are saying about you. I archived it, and also I made like 20 copies and gave it to our governing board, because I know that they don't know what we do. So that was really kind of, and now they've picked it. There was a lot of work to do, but that was the kind of way, a positive way of saying, hey, look at where you work, and look how wonderful these teachers are, and look at your colleagues, and aren't you proud of yourselves? And I want to say this as we're coming towards the end of today, that first of all, thank you, my colleagues, but thank you, all of you, for coming and for your hospitality. And if I can say one thing, if I can end by just saying one thing, is that what you do, what we do, matters. If you come out with one thing, if you remember nothing that I've said to you, it's that what we do matters. I don't care what anybody says to you. I don't care. I don't care how much money we have, we don't have. We're going to do it, and it counts, and it matters, and this is how you change the world. Even though my husband says I'm an idealist. But I say to him, but if nobody's out there, fighting the good fight, then how do you have to change anything? So.
We have time for one final question, and it's going to come from a very important person. And in my summing up, I'll explain why this person is so important.
Monica's concerned.
Yeah. You know something I don't? My question has to do with, I'm from the library, by the way. Monica knows why I'm from the library. And and my question has to do with books, but a different sort of book, and that is the textbook. It used to be the students would have bragging rights if they were senior, they'd never come to the library. Now they have bragging rights when they say, I got 6 A's and I never had to buy my textbook. My question is, what do you consider to be the future of the textbook and its value in teaching and learning now and forward?
Not much to say, by Sam.
I'm glad that you asked the question because I don't know the answer to it. Or at least I think that I know the answer to it. I think it's going to come more as packages as opposed to just the textbook itself. You're going to have multimedia content in the textbook. You're going to have adaptive learning taking place, asking questions right after certain sections of the chapter, and be able to see that maybe the student needs to take a different direction, maybe it needs to be pointed towards a different part of the chapter. So those are my views in that, but I think it's a very difficult thing to do, especially the way the publishers are trying to approach this particular problem, where they're not giving full access to the books for a long period of time, finding time again that you can only use the e-book for one semester, and if it's a prerequisite for another class, they cannot use it, they have to buy it again. So I think that model has to change. But I see a lot of positives in the way the e-books are now being made in terms of the annotations. Students can talk to each other, they can make their own annotations, and their fellow students can see these annotations, the teacher can see these annotations. So if we have all the interaction taking place within the textbook itself, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
I think you're right. You do have the right answer there, and just building off what you said. It's what I said about the future classroom as well. It's mixed modalities. There's not one right thing. And even a textbook, even in the past, not all students learned well from the textbooks, but some really did. They learned well. So I think you're right. There's going to be a shift to a holistic multimedia approach where I think the textbook is still going to have some, if not reference value to the students, but it's going to be supplemented with multimedia and other technologies to kind of resonate, I think, with the classroom of the future.
Yeah, to that I would add, information literacy becomes even more critical now than ever before, and will continue to be critical, so that we're not just using textbooks as one source for students, but we're helping them to find sources from articles and other things all over to figure out which sources are accurate and legitimate and all of these things. That becomes even a greater challenge. But I see it as becoming much more exploratory, and as you said, the textbook's moving into more of a multimedia, not a physical textbook, although I'm not firm believer in that, the solid, the firm book will still exist as we know it, and but the things will change, continue to change, I guess.
As a writer, I have a fondness for print. I do think that our definition of a textbook is going to change.
And the book.
As I was sitting in the Smart Lab today, I was thinking that it would be such a great application to use. I know it would be like $1 gazillion, but to use that as a textbook, to have it in 3D, like here you are actually listening to Socrates or listening to insects. Or we were talking before to maybe do imaging of the brain as the students are in their flow of the creative process. How terrific would that be? Or maybe even talk back to the writer, have the writer, how great we have. So I think our definition is going to change, but I just happen to think that the print isn't going to go away because it's just so nice.
Well, on that point, Monica, you're probably wondering why you are so special. And it really comes back to a comment that Christy shared earlier, and that is that student success is a movement. And it's a conversation that Paul, Docell, and I have had, and others have had over the years, that we realize from the outset that this isn't something that you can impose on a community. The community has to own this. So the reason why I said Monica is so important, she said, I'm a librarian. She's much more than a librarian. We have a remarkably talented team of student affairs leaders here this afternoon. You're not privileged to know who everyone is in the audience. Our academic advisors, our graduate school, undergraduate studies, instructional and information technology. It's all of you that make this happen. I was particularly intrigued by the conversation we're having about content acquisition, knowledge acquisition, and skill and competency development. We're hearing through our Career Center today that employers are as interested in graduates that leave the University of South Florida with an understanding of how to promote collaboration, how to work in teams, in partnership with one another, problem-solving skills, broadly grit, not specifically in engineering. By the way, the question that mystified you came from a graduate of the College of Engineering. It may have mystified you, perhaps it shouldn't have surprised you. But we'll coach him next time.
No, I think I need to be coached.
But in closing, and I do have to wrap this up very, very quickly because I'm already late for a faculty senate meeting, and you know what that means for the provost, who knows if I've still got a job at the moment. But in all seriousness, this has been a session that many of us will remember for many, many years. Thank you so much for generously giving of your time, your wisdom, your experience, in helping us better shape a future for students at the University of South Florida. We're very, very proud of what we've accomplished in a relatively short time here. We're certainly not satisfied, and we realize there's work yet to be done. There's plenty of refreshments on the side here at the back for the introverts who are in the audience. You have an opportunity to continue the conversation with our guests for a little while. But most particularly, I want to thank you for taking your time and demonstrating to the USF community how important student success is to you. Thank you.